And the Kremlin at some point has to realize they are not invincible. They may run the nation, but they're not invincible. They're only as invincible as the people allow them to be.
This is the God.
Sanctions on Russia. Recently, NATO's response to Russia's invasion in Ukraine has been sanctions. Now, me personally, I thought that the correct response would be a re-invasion, a counter-invasion, an act of standing with the people of Ukraine by putting boots on the ground. That was my ideal response from NATO. But NATO chose sanctions over warfare. Now, could these sanctions cause civil war or possibly World War III? Civil war or World War III? Now, you might be wondering, why would it cause something like civil war? Well, let's look at the facts. For one, after spending a few years of being globally connected to the economy, Russians now find themselves unceremoniously unplugged from the greater world economy. You guys do know that, thanks to Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Foreign investors and banks are completely pulled out. They're not interested in losing their money as a result of what Russia has done. They're not interested in crashing down with Russia and the ruble. Not interested. In fact, Nike and Apple have pulled their online stores from Russia. So now people, they can't even order anything. They can't order shoes. They can't order anything from Nike or Apple. Currently, they cannot do that. That is the magnitude of what is happening here. Companies that we take for granted here in America, we just always assume they'll always be there at our beck and call, have completely pulled out from Russia. Maersk and MSC have suspended container shipping to Russia, and Boeing and Airbus have suspended the sending of spare parts to Russian airlines. Now that's big. Maersk and MSC have suspended container shipping to Russia, which means Russia is not getting the containers, I believe, necessary to basically continue the shipping back and forth of goods. They're going to be stuck with whatever they've got. I'm not sure if it means the exact shipping of goods or the shipping of containers themselves to facilitate the shipping of goods. Either way, neither is good. And people are rushing to withdraw cash, which is very reminiscent of the Great Depression, when people back then rushed to withdraw their cash, which will cause failure of the banks because they're going to have to liquidate their loans. That also will greatly impact the Russian economy. And the people have no choice because, unfortunately, because of the sanctions, their savings have become worth nil to nothing, zero. Nil to nothing, zero. The ruble is now worth 1 cent on the dollar. 1 cent. And you believe that this won't cause civil war? The Russian people are protesting the war in Ukraine as we speak. They don't want to become the global ire. They don't want to become the object of everyone's hatred on an international level. That's not something that they want to become. That's not something that they want to risk. And they don't want to become Ukraine times 3. The damage that Russia is doing in Ukraine currently is nothing in comparison to what the world could do to Russia if they were fed up enough. And the Russian people understand that. And that is why a civil war might be what NATO is praying for. NATO might be looking to stoke the fires of civil war, to stoke the fires of dissent, to stoke the fires of rebellion within Russia, the same way Putin has stoked those same exact flames in Ukraine to facilitate his own invasion. That is a possibility. Now, the more likely possibility is that Russia is going to much rather fall on its sword. It's much more likely to fall on its sword than it is to try and risk civil war. Why not strike? Let's cast the first stone. Let's launch World War III. Let's get it over with. Let's get it out the way instead of waiting and allowing factions to rise up against the Kremlin and rise up against Vladimir Putin. How about we start the war ourselves and get these people drafted and get our nation focused on defending itself from the rest of the world? Those are the two most likely outcomes that I personally see as a result of these insane sanctions. And when you truly look at these sanctions for what they are, and you look at what's actually happening, when you look at the resources that the Russian people are being kept away from, when you look at the drop in value of their currency, when you look at the fact that these banks and these investors are pulling out, when you look at these shipping companies that are refusing to ship goods and to ship the containers for the goods themselves to Russia, you have to wonder, what is Russia going to do in response to this change? What is it going to do? There's something is going to have to give at some point. The Russian people don't want to live like this. And the Kremlin at some point has to realize they are not invincible. They may run the nation, but they're not invincible. They're only as invincible as the people allow them to be. All powerful entities in all countries are only as powerful as the people in those countries allow them to be. And I believe NATO is betting on the Russian people overthrowing Putin and placing a pro-Western leader within Russia. That could be a reality in the future. It's a possibility. And it might be a horizon that the West is setting its eyes upon that we just can't see just yet. But in my opinion, I firmly believe that the much more likely outcome is that Russia will press the button before everyone else. Now, do I mean the nuclear button? No. But like we've covered multiple times, Russia cannot win a conventional war against NATO. It's not possible. So it might press the nuclear button before things get conventional, before boots are placed on the ground, because Russia knows it can't beat the United States in a conventional war, nor can it beat the United States and the rest of NATO. So it becomes increasingly clear that Putin's back is against the wall. The decision to invade Ukraine was a testy one, and we're going to see what the consequences of that decision might be in the future, in the very near future. And I don't mean the consequences as in what is NATO going to do. The consequences as in what is Russia going to do? Will Russia devolve into civil war, or will World War III be in its fate, in all of our fates? Is that what awaits all of us? Because Russia cannot continue to sustain these sanctions for long. It's biting at the Russian people's economy. It's ruining their lives. It's hurting them. It's hurting their businesses. It's hurting their banks. It's hurting their personal lives. It's destroying them. And the reality of the situation is something is going to have to give. At some point, the dam will break. The question is how?